it's pretty good. That's a surprising thing to say in 2020, but if we look back to week one, I think most people would agree that we had an exciting, clean slate of games. But most importantly, and most surprisingly, the XFL out of the gate looked like a polished professional product, something that we simply didn't expect. Of course, hopefully I don't eat my words and regret saying that, but I think we can genuinely be excited for the XFL and for the XFL 2020 and beyond. Of course, this means good things for fantasy football, and that's exactly why you're here, because we're moving on to week two, and we're talking week two XFL DFS picks. In this video, we'll talk about the upcoming weekend slate of games, some of the week one leaders. We're going to give a quick outlook and talk strategy for week two, and then we're going to jump into the quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers that I believe are the best picks for this weekend, week two of the XFL. So if you're interested in fantasy football and playing XFL DFS for week two, sit back, relax, and let me talk about some of my favorite plays and picks for this upcoming weekend's action. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Of course, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to these XFL videos, DFS videos here on YouTube. It is 8 a.m. here on the East Coast. I've waited as long as I possibly can to get as much information for the XFL as possible. We're talking injuries, rosters, depth charts, all that stuff, so you're prepared for week two setting your lineups. I just want to make a quick note that I have changed these videos up a little bit. I've changed some of the formatting, some of the visuals to help you guys get all the information you need as quickly as possible. Again, we're talking Saturday here. We only have a couple hours till kickoff for week two, so let's jump right into it. A 2-game slate on Saturday and another 2-game slate on Sunday. If you're playing DraftKings, that'll be one big slate, my favorite for the main slate. Highly recommend DraftKings right now. FanDuel just needs to get their shit in order, in my opinion. They're doing it a split slate. They're not getting as many contests. They're really not even updating guys' bios. DraftKings is the way to play XFL right now. But again, February 15, 2020, we're talking a 2-game slate here. Again, similar to last week, we have a 2 p.m. and a 5 p.m. game. 2 p.m. game is New York at DC. That should be a great game. Guardians looked good last week. DC, of course, one of the better teams in the league from the beginning. At 5 p.m. Eastern time, we have Tampa Bay at Seattle. These teams still up in the air. We have a backup quarterback playing for Tampa Bay, and Seattle not expected to be a good team this year. Nonetheless, we have a 5 p.m. game between those two teams. Flipping over to Sunday, February 16th, we have Dallas visiting LA. I'm pretty excited for that game. The difference this week is they've bumped that to 3 p.m., and then we have St. Louis visiting Houston at 6 p.m. So a little bit later on Sunday. Nonetheless, two great games playing out on Sunday. We had a lot of great action in week one. I was very, very surprised, pleasantly surprised, again, at the quality of product, how professional it was. More importantly, it was a clean, fast-paced game. There wasn't a ton of penalties. I really did enjoy week one XFL. Some guys were very surprising. One guy in particular I can think of, Walker, quarterback for Houston, really came out of the gates. We recommended him in our video. Just an excellent performance by him, 4 total touchdowns. Something to look forward to how that team plays out. Nonetheless, I like to quickly, for these videos, stats are just that. They're stats. We only have 1 week worth of stats, but we can look back to week one now. We can put together some things, and what I really want to focus on here are 3 things. That's running back snap percentage, basically which running backs are playing the highest percentage snaps, basically who's on the field. Wide receiver targets, always a good thing, especially in PR, and wide receiver target percentage. So how much of the team's percentage of targets is going to leading that category. For running backs, we're talking about Butler week one for Houston playing 71% of the snaps. He's of course priced up a little bit this week because of that, but the highest percentage of snaps was played by him. And then Hood for Los Angeles, again 71% of snaps played by those two. Those two really were well above most all other running backs. So if you're looking to find running backs, maybe not my recommendation for this week to pay up, but if you're looking for running backs that are on the field, those are your 2 guys right there. We have Smith for Tampa Bay. He played 65% of snaps. Matt Jones for St. Louis played 64% of snaps. I'm a little bit concerned there because of Michael. I don't know how that'll play out. And then finally, Presley, a big favorite chalky guy week one for DC. Got 59% of the snaps, not as high as we would like, but again, another guy that's playing the majority of the snaps at the running back position. For wide receivers, our target leader, Spruce, led all targets by 1 million. He had 15 total targets for LA, had a great game with both those. We're going to talk about him later, but he was 5 above the second place here, which I hopefully will pronounce this right. Pro for Seattle had 10 total targets. Sammy Coates for Houston had 9. He was also sharing that 9, another 9 with another Houston receiver in Phillips, and then D. Williams for Tampa Bay also had 9. So guys there, if you're looking for targets, chasing targets, those are your guys guys that got the majority of the targets week 1 in terms of leaderboard. And finally, how does that play out into a percentage, wide receiver target percentage? Well, you can see here Spruce still atop the board. Fully expected that at 38% for Los Angeles. D. Williams bumps up a little bit. They did not throw the ball as many times, but he still got 9 targets. He's bumping up to 25% of his team targets went to him. Again, I don't want to butcher his name. Pro for Seattle, 25%. Sammy Coates at 23%. And then Eli Rodgers, the guy I'm going to talk about later, at 3%. So some interesting stats there. These are still only 1 week worth of stats. Take them as they are, but they can be helpful. You can kind of figure out who's on the field for running backs, which wide receivers are getting targeted the most. Hopefully this helps us week 2 and beyond. Some other notes I quickly want to talk about for week 2. Looking forward to week 2, we're still without any significant data. I already talked about that, so be cautious. Don't expect the same. Just because Sammy Coates got 9 targets, he can get 1 target. We don't have a season worth of data. We don't have a career to look at. We have none of that. We don't even have multiple weeks to look at. So be cautious. Use the data as much as you can, but just remember it's only 1 week worth of data. A running back might not see the field this week that saw 70% of the snaps last week. We just don't know. So I would just say be cautious. Use the data as it is. More importantly, watch the games. If you watch the game, you kind of tell which players are standing out. That's kind of the advantage right now for DFS in my opinion. There were also a number of important injuries in week 1. Some of those affected outcomes. Of course, we had for Dallas, Landry Jones starting quarterback. We had for LA, Johnson starting quarterback. Both those guys sat. So those teams, I believe both teams lost. Didn't look too great on either team. Didn't push the ball downfield. That can quickly switch in 1 week, the quarterback's being back. So pay attention to injury news. Pay attention to how teams played with certain quarterbacks, without certain quarterbacks, with guys being injured. All that is important, and it's something to pay attention to going into 2. I also want to make a note here that if you're trying to play DFS, in my opinion, the right way, you got to try to understand other players. Game theory, all that comes into play. Understanding which players will be chalk, where DFS, we're talking DFS players, are going to go with their picks. In my opinion, this week, at least moving forward, other DFS players will favor week 1 running backs that got the most attempts and which receivers got the most amount of target. Does that mean don't play those guys? Absolutely not. I've showcased which guys, especially for targets or leaders, but nonetheless, you can kind of understand and get an advantage and know a certain guy might not turn that same production out week 2. You can really get an edge on the competition. So pay attention to that and don't fall into that trap. Really do your research and understand where other DFS players are going and if you can pivot off of that. My little tidbit on strategy here, for week 2, I'm likely only playing 1 running back. On DraftKings, you're only required to play 1 running back. Everything else is dedicated to wide receivers, flex. Right now, based upon what I saw in week 1, how things played out and how disappointing running backs were, I will be dedicating my flex position to receivers, wide receivers, not tight ends. I'm probably playing no tight end, but just something to note of. That's my strategy right now. I think that will work the best. Seemed to work the best last. So again, strategy right there is play only 1 running back, fill the rest of your flex with wide receiver. Some more strategy here. I'm going to pay up for quarterback, pay up for wide receiver, and do my best to pay down for running back. I'll showcase some picks up here coming. That's going to fit that strategy. I'm not going to sit here and give you guys expensive running backs when I'm not going to play expensive running backs. So again, just pay attention as I go through my picks here. But that's the general strategy. 1 running back, flex dedicated to receiver, pay up for quarterback, pay up for wide receiver, pay down for running back. Also, based upon everything I just said there, this is a different approach than the NFL. Could this change? Could we turn into more of an NFL style approach for DFS? Absolutely. But right now, we're pretty much the opposite of NFL. I'm not chasing carries. I'm not chasing guys and running backs. I'm not trying to fit running backs into my flex and get 20, 25 touches out of running backs like Christian McCaffrey. We don't have that right now as a luxury, and I also don't see that benefiting us right now. So I'm pretty much going the opposite of what I've done for the NFL. We'll see how that plays out. Lastly here, watch the week 2 games. That is the most important advice I can give to you guys right now, because stats are not good. They're not going to be good for, even at the end of the season, you really can't do much in terms of statistically being accurate with just that many games. Watch the games. Understand which players are standing out, especially in this league. Certain players are really going to be head and shoulders above others. The only way you're going to know that is by watching games in particular. So I encourage that. And also beyond that, it helps the game. We want to continue to play DFS. You're here because you like the XFL and you want to play XFL DFS. The only way we're going to do that is to help this league survive. And to do that, we have to help. We have to watch the games. We have to pay attention. So this weekend for week 2, make sure you tune into these games, put them on your television as you're cooking in the kitchen, catching up for Valentine's Day disasters, whatever you're doing, turn on these games. Let's enjoy week 2 XFL. So moving on to the meat of this video, the reason why you're here, my picks for week 2 at the quarterback position. I like Landry Jones and Cardell Jones. Sticking with the Joneses here. A million different puns I could say there, but those are the guys I'm sticking with. Both guys decently decently priced. Landry Jones a little bit too cheap in my opinion. That's why I have him listed first here. $9,500 on DraftKings, $19 on FanDuel, playing at LA. Dallas is a favorite here. I believe the line has dropped down to -4. It was 6.5, 7 at one point, but he's fully healthy. He's a massive upgrade compared to the quarterback they were running at the position last week. He's a higher profile player for the XFL. He's actually considered at some points face of the XFL. He's one of the biggest names in the XFL right now. Significant NFL experience, 3 years, 5 starts for the Pittsburgh Steelers, at over 1,300 passing yards. So again, you got a guy with a decent amount of NFL experience. He should be one of those guys that stands out, is clearly above the competition, and he paired with his college coach Bob Stoops. I think that's the most important thing here, because Bob Stoops, his offensive coordinator, it's the air raid offense. They're going to throw the ball a ton. Landry Jones knows that system. He grew up in that system. Everything should merge here. I was loving him last week. Unfortunately, he was injured in play, but he should pick up right where he left off. His price has dropped. I love everything about that. I'm going to be playing a ton of Landry Jones this weekend in DFS. And then more importantly, if we want to look to week 1, LA's defense wasn't very good. They allowed 270 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns. So again, a good matchup, at least based upon week 1 right now for Landry Jones. And in my opinion, he best pick and the guy I'll be sticking with this weekend for the money. If you want to pay up a little bit, you can go back to Cardell Jones this week. 10-2 on DraftKings, $21 on FanDuel. A bit pricey. Going to be hard to fit a lot of those expensive wide receivers with him, but nonetheless, he is in a great spot, and he's a safe pick here on DFS. He's playing at home versus New York. DC is a big favorite this week at -7, but I'm not too worried about those lines in the XFL, at least right now. Last week, he had a pretty good week. Didn't throw the ball a ton, 16 for 26, 235 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns. The most important thing here is he looked good playing. Although he didn't throw the ball a lot, he pushed the ball downfield, and he also had a high number of rushing attempts. He had 9 rushing attempts for 28 yards. Not big statistics there, but the fact that he rushed the ball 9 times, he's pushing the ball downfield. They're a good offense. He didn't get sacked. I think he only got sacked once, so the offensive line is performing well. All these things are what you want out of a DFS quarterback. Leads to big opportunity, leads to big scoring, so I do like those. They're pointing me back to Cardell Jones this week. He also had the top passer grading. I'll put weight into that. By Pro Football Focus, they had him at 90.8, was by far the best passer for the XFL in week 1. His DFS price remotely remains the same, so that's good news this week. It should have bumped up a lot. It didn't really do that. The only concern is the New York defensive line looked really good last week. I think it was a pretty surprising good performance by the New York Guardians. They had a good defense and they had a good D-line, so that would be my only caution with him this week. I do like Landry Jones more, but Cardell Jones probably offers more upside with his legs. You do have to pay for it, but he is a safe play. These are my 2 recommendations at the quarterback. Moving on to running backs, this is where I said we're going to pay down this week. That is my strategy. 2 guys here are very, very cheap. They're not any of the top tier guys in terms of pricing. Darius Victor for the New York Guardians, $4,100 on DraftKings, dirt cheap, $16 on FanDuel, playing on the road at DC. Big favorite here, big underdog here. New York is a +7 underdog. I don't put much weight into that. Would I ever in the NFL recommend a backup running back at that is a huge underdog on the road? Absolutely not. But we're doing that this week. It is the XFL. Things are differently done, and nothing makes sense, so that's where we're going. Again, you're paying way down here. You're saving a ton of money, which is going to help us fit the strategy we want. DFS slate. He's a heavy underdog. I already mentioned that. He appears more versatile as the running back versus the other guy, which is Cook. They pretty much split carries 50-50, or should I say snap counts 50-50. Victor ended up with more carries. And again, he looks like more of the the more versatile running back, whereas Cook looks more of that goal line bruiser type of running back. So in a situation which they might trail a lot, and he already has showcased he got more carries last week, could be the guy out of the backfield catching the ball a lot more. I like Victor this week. Again, he's listed as the running back 2 in week 1, but he received the majority of the workload. He had 12 total touches and catches, 51% of the running back snaps, and he received, more importantly, if you go to CBS, they have a nice DFS article related to XFL, one of the few sites you can probably rely on right now, but they noted him as receiving 3 out of the 4 running back touches within the 10-yard line. So again, all good things here. They're putting the ball in his hands in the importance. And so for such a cheap price, I can go with Victor the Guardian. Beyond that, I like Nick Hawley, who is $4,800 on DraftKings, $14 on FanDuel, playing at home versus St. Louis. Houston, again, a big favorite favorite here at -7. He's a running back on DraftKings, a wide receiver on FanDuel. Next week, I can almost guarantee he will be a wide receiver on DraftKings, but we're taking advantage of that right now. That's what we're doing here. He can play the running back position for you, but he plays wide receiver, if that makes sense. Again, listed as running back on DraftKings. Last week, week 1, he played 66% of the snaps at wide receiver. I don't know if he even played running back, traditional running back. He's playing slot receiver for them. He had 5 targets, 4 receptions, 50 yards. He made a big catch in the red zone for them, so they're going to him more often than not in tight situations. Week 1, slot receiver and tight ends dominated the production versus the St. Louis defense. So if you want to talk about matchup, the inside guys are the ones to look for versus that St. Louis defense based on week 1. Things could change. We don't have a lot of stats on that, but Nick Hawley fits that mold. He's going to play that inside receiver for Houston. He's not going to play running back, but he saves us a ton of money. Fit him into your lineup in the running back position, and then pretty much play all wide receivers across the board. So speaking of wide receivers, where should we go with this money that we saved with running backs? First and foremost, I'm paying the money. I talked about people are going to chase targets. I'm doing it here with Nelson Spruce. He's $10,400 on DraftKings, so he's going to be more expensive than our running backs, more expensive than our quarterback. $20 on FanDuel, so very, very pricey, but in my opinion, worth every penny. Playing at home versus Dallas. LA is an underdog here, getting 4 points. Maybe it's a good thing. If it's like the NFL, you want the receivers and the quarterbacks that are going to trail a little bit, throw the ball more. If this is the XFL, they're going to throw the ball a ton anyway. He had elite volume in week 1, 15 total targets. I don't care what league you play in. That is a ridiculous amount of targets, and I'm going to chase that for sure this week 1. Turn that 15 targets into 11 receptions, 103 receiving yards. So he was not only did he get the targets, but he was very efficient with those targets. Actually turn those into catches. Isn't always the case, a la Sammy Coates, who we'll talk about next. League leading 35% of the target share. I showcased that on one of our very first early talks about how he led the league in target share. All good things. They're going to the ball. They're going to him with the ball a ton, with volume and with, in general, the amount of shares of targets. Beyond that, if you want to go to Pro Football Focus, I don't put too much weight into this in right now because of the lack of stats in general. But the wide receiver cornerback matchup, talked about that a lot in the NFL, published by Pro Football Focus, plus 24%. That's either number 1 or 2 in the XFL right now. So all good things in terms of matchup. We do know, of course, the XFL is designed to be more up-tempo, but you're also playing a more up-tempo game. So you got up-tempo on up-tempo. Dallas, Bob Stoops, the air raid offense, Landry Jones back. That offense is going to click. They're going to move the ball a ton, which results in more opportunities for the opposition on offense. Nelson Spruce, of course, playing for LA, going to get, in my opinion, more opportunity than last because of the up-tempo game versus Dallas. And the big thing I want to mention here is this isn't much of a surprise, and this is why I'm comfortable paying up for him and recommending him. This is a carryover from the AAF. Yeah, that league didn't last, but at that point when that league failed, he was the second in terms of the AAF in reception league. So this isn't new to him. He's a guy that is a high volume, high target type of receiver. He turns that into catches, and he of course did it in the past. Lastly here, probably most importantly, he had a backup quarterback last week, and he did that. And this week he should be getting Johnson back. In fact, I think as I read this morning, Johnson is in fact going to start this week. So good things here. Upgraded quarterback, big volume, big target share, up-tempo game. Every box is checked for Nelson Spruce. So I can't wait for him to fail, but he really shouldn't. I do recommend him this week. I'm going straight back to Sammy Coates. I recommended him last week. Didn't do much. Was very, very disappointing. $9,500 on DraftKings, $17 on FanDuel. Playing at home versus St. Louis. Houston, of course, I already talked about it. A -7 favorite playing at home. Poor output in week 1, but he did have excellent opportunity, and that's what we're focusing on here. In week 1, he had 9 targets. That's a ton of targets. He only had 2 receptions for 26 yards, but he led the league with 5 targets of 20 or more yards down the field, meaning he's a deep threat. They're taking shots trying to hit him deep. I watched the game. He had a couple very, very close calls. I believe he caught one just out of bounds. He's going to turn these into big games. He's going to continue to get such high volume of deep passes. You're going to get touchdowns. You're going to get those big scoring 150-yard multiple touchdown games. They're coming for Sammy Coates. I'm chasing that. I believe right now he had a 24% target share last week, tied for 3rd in the league. I had him on the chart. DFS prices increased. Hopefully with that and the fact he had a disappointing week 1, we could get lower ownership on him. Again, trying to pivot here, get a little bit of a disparity in a 8 total team 4-game slate here. And finally here, talked about it last week. The reason why I liked him last week, he is Sammy Coates. Solid NFL experience, 3rd round draft pick, big college career. excellent size, excellent speed. Should be one of those guys that naturally dominates the XFL. I'm going back to Sammy Coates. One difference from last week, I'm going to give you another set of receivers here, mainly because I'm not recommending running backs. I'm recommending you fill your flex positions with wide receivers, so giving you only 2 receivers is not enough. We're going to go 4 receivers here, and we're going to jump down in price a little bit. I gave you 2 expensive guys. We're going to kind of go to a middle tier, and then we're going to drop to a very, very tier here. So 4 wide receivers, I'm going to recommend Eli Rodgers for the DC Defenders. He's $9,700 on DraftKings, $17 on FanDuel, playing at home versus New York. The New York Guardians already mentioned that. Pretty tough defense week 1, but I do like Eli Rodgers here as a -7 favorite for the Defenders. DC concentrated their passing attack. I ran the numbers here. This is why I like Eli Rodgers. They didn't pass the ball a lot. I think I said that Cardell Jones had 26 total attempts. Not the best in terms of volume, but they led most of the game. They really dominated that game. But more importantly, Rodgers and Dupree were the main receivers to receive targets when they went out. 40% of wide receiver targets went to Rodgers and Dupree. I think that's a massive percentage. Could this turn into a Mike Evans, Godwin type of situation? Maybe. I'm not talking about these receivers being that good, but I'm talking about in terms of 2 guys on a team, a predictable passing attack. I think we could be seeing something here. I'm trying to jump on that early. So Eli Rodgers is my man. Week 1, 25% of target share. He only played 69% of the snaps though, so keep that in mind. Extremely efficient with his targets. Week 1, he had 6 targets, caught every single one of them for 73 reception yards. He's listed as a starter for week 2, whereas week 1 he wasn't. Obviously being highlighted by the staff here a little bit more. Again, solid NFL experience. He has a top quarterback in Cardell Jones that can push the ball downfield, top coach and offense, all good things. I like Eli Rodgers for $9,700 on DraftKings this week in that hopefully concentrated, predictable passing attack. And jumping way down here in price, trying to save you a couple bucks. Reese Horn here, $3,800 on DraftKings, $13 on FanDuel, playing on the road at Seattle. Tampa Bay is a -2 favorite, even though they have a backup quarterback. I don't even know if we know who's playing quarterback. Could be Flowers, could be a mixture between him and somebody else. But nonetheless, we're talking about a cheap guy here. That's why I like Reese Horn. Cheap DFS price tag for a decent amount of targets and opportunity. That's what we're chasing here. He led the team with a 24% target share, even though he was either the 3rd or 4th listed on the depth chart. Week 1, 5 targets, 3 receptions, 42 yards. And the only caution, I already talked about it, there could be a rotation of quarterbacks with Murray set to miss time with injury. But again, $3,800 trying to pay down here, save some money. I think at $3,800 you take the risk. Hopefully he gets another 5 or 6 targets, turns that into something. If he gets a touchdown, he's going to blow value out of the water. And so that wraps up my main recommended plays. I've listed a couple more guys here if you're looking to play around. Only one other running back. If I'm going to pay up at running back, which I will not be, but if I did, I would play James Butler. He's the guy I think is most attractable at his price, especially DraftKings, if you're looking to pay up. Rashad Ross, wide receiver for DC. Do like him this week. Talked about Austin. I'm going to look it up for next week. Austin Prowl, wide receiver for Seattle. Jeff Badette, wide receiver for Dallas. Pair somebody with, I think you can pair most any receiver with Landry Jones. Just make sure of starter. Dan Williams, wide receiver for Tampa Bay. Pair him also with Jalen Tolliver for wide receiver for Tampa Bay. Both those guys, great situations, decent target shares. A lot of these guys on the cheaper in terms of price tag. Donald Parham, wide receiver for Dallas. He is actually a tight end, but he's listed as receiver. He got a majority of the targets last week for Dallas, but the only situation here is with quarterback that's going to actually push the ball down. And Marcus Lucas, wide receiver for St. Louis. Again, another cheap guy you could line up. All right, so that wraps up the week 2 XFL video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports. As always, I thank you for finding this channel, tuning into these videos here. If you're new here or simply haven't done so already, I encourage you to please hit that subscribe button. It is really the easiest way to help support this channel and continue the longevity of these videos. I keep putting videos out each and every week because it's a passion of mine, but more importantly, because hopefully it's helping you guys. And if it does help you guys, make sure you hit that like button. Again, another simple way to help support the channel. And of course, if you have any notes, if I'm missing anything, if you disagree with any of these picks or have something else I might into my lineups, please let me know. I am more than happy to adjust these videos, and I'm interested to see what you guys are looking forward to in week 2 of the XFL and which players you'll be putting into your lineup. So please comment down below any of that information. Finally, as always, good luck in week 2, and I hope to see you atop the boards.